Hello everyone, it's the storyteller here. I've prepared something slow, eerie, and sleep-friendly for you tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you drifting off already, or still wide awake? Teddy bear. It's all your fault, you know. Picture it now. I was standing at that sparkling marble countertop, sorting through the mail, when I saw it. A thin envelope addressed to Joanne Roberts. It sat on my counter for hours while I cleaned up the kitchen, completed an online yoga workout, and took a hot shower. Young's Storage Company, in red letters as the header to the return address, gave me plenty of info to begin searching online. Final notice stamped in red across the front let me know what it was about. Still, I wanted to know the specifics. I must confess, noticed my first night in the house, there weren't any photos of you. Not even a wedding picture. All of the decor was masculine with sharp corners. No color. Somewhere, deep down, I knew he had erased you. But above that knowledge, I had known I was prepared to replace you. I put on my best little red sundress and made myself lunch. A turkey sandwich, side salad, Diet Coke. Did I purposefully knock over my drink? Onto the letter? No. All right. You caught me. I did. Why would my husband have a letter from a storage company addressed to you? It was easy to open the letter, but the only thing inside was a boring notice about you being behind on payments. How can a ghost be behind on payments? I asked him all those questions over dinner. He wrapped me up in kisses, saying, "I'll sort it all out tomorrow, my dear." I didn't want you to be surrounded by her memory. It seemed cruel, but I couldn't part myself entirely from her. She always had a storage unit to house her stuff, so I just kept it going. His beautiful eyes stared at the leftover gravy on his plate, creating a masterpiece with the mashed potatoes. Then he changed the topic and complimented my dress. Did I mention that Jonathan picked all my dresses for me? I remember that day so vividly, so fondly. We had been walking around the mall on our third date after gorging ourselves on soft pretzels and soda pop, when he pulled me into this shop with a pretty little poppy on the sign. We walked past the mini skirts in neon colors, past the intricately woven crop tops, and into the section at the back of the store where dresses hung on racks with signs reading "Discount." All of the tags had little red stickers on them, marking their new price with the old price in block. Black. Print clearly beneath it, so you truly understood the bargain you were getting. Jonathan fingered through them, looked me up and down, and returned to the rack. I did the same, trying to laugh through the pain of explaining my dress size to a new guy. But Jonathan was an old hat at all of this. He was a widower, after all. Mom lost her mind when I told her I met a guy. You know how mothers can be. They just worry. I played it smart, though. I introduced Jonathan into the conversation, all casual, like he was a description of sunny weather. I met a guy, Mom, I said, and her whole body shifted in the salon chair. It was such an abrupt change. Her pedicurist rushed to grab towels and mop up the oily, warm water she had sloshed everywhere. She demanded details. I told her everything I could. That Jonathan was a kind man. That he was incredibly musically talented. That he led the whole church every Sunday at the college mass in song. And, oh yeah, he's a widower. That detail shut her up for a bit. Mom begged me every week to come to church with her and Dad. I always had an excuse why I couldn't manage to go. Of course, the knowledge of Jonathan's existence somehow excused all the excuses. It made it all make sense. It was that final piece of the puzzle. But I could see in her eyes that the word widower frightened her. I watched it wash over her like a wave. It crashed into her heart. It scared her with all of its unspoken realities. An age gap that requires both hands to count, kids, baggage, survivor's guilt. Would I spend my whole life measuring up to another woman? I assured her that day that I could handle being courted by a widower. Jonathan, in his most charming state, was a master at courtship. After all, he had succeeded in the task at least once. He bought flowers, insisted on meeting Mom and Dad with wine in hand, and when he knelt down on one knee, the whole world held its breath, waiting for my answer. Of course, it was yes. It had to be yes. Be honest. Did you see the signs? We attended the mandatory meetings with our local priest, who already adored Jonathan, perhaps more than me. He even used our story in a Sunday homily about the importance of the vocation of marriage in the church. He said, I was once approached by a parishioner, our beloved Jonathan, who said he was called to serve God with his voice, and I simply couldn't say no. Just remember, if God calls you to serve, there's nearly no way for me to deny the request. And we all looked to the rafters. I swear Jonathan winked at me. His mother taught him piano. His father taught him to pick a career worth having, which is how he had the gumption to endure college, law school, and life as a first-year associate. All of these milestones belong to the first Mrs. Roberts. Jonathan didn't bring her into the conversation until halfway through our first date. Listen, he said, as he leaned across the metal table of the cafe. I've done this before. I am serious about it. I want to get married again. I am called to marriage. I know you're young. I never want you feeling rushed into it. It's a serious commitment. I swear he stole those words right from my father's lips. Yet I smiled. I nodded. I promised I could hold it together, and if I squinted, I could block out the stands of gray in his jet black hair. He laughed when I told him that joke. Wouldn't you? Dad takes Jonathan out golfing every weekend, while Mom and I get our nails done. It started out as a habit when we were busy planning the wedding, but it turned into something more for them. They'd come back flushed and happy, giggling, like schoolgirls with secrets. They'd sweep Mom and I up in their arms, and we'd all go out to eat at a fancy restaurant, and Jonathan would pull out his black credit card with that devil-may-care grin before driving me back to the 4-bedroom house I shared with the girls from Bible study. He'd give me a peck on the cheek. I'd press my back up against the cold door and cross out another day on my calendar until graduation. My cap and gown came in a navy blue and gold. My diploma, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, rolled up into a single sheet of fancy parchment, eventually ended up in the back of the closet. But on that day, I knew that the diploma wasn't what I was walking out those auditorium doors with. No, I was walking out with my fiancé, whom my family adored, as my friends crowded me shouting, "5 months until you get your MRS degree. You would have adored our wedding day." It was so perfectly perfect in every way. Jonathan had told me that his first wedding was in mid-June, so we decided to have a winter wedding. October 20th. We chose a Friday so that we could advertise the event as an excuse for a long weekend. He was practiced at catering tasting and planning weather-based backup plans. It was easy to forget why he knew how to do it all. Jonathan's parents, longtime managers in the hospitality industry, ensured we had the very best rates for our guests and a beautiful hall for the reception. It all went to plan. The gorgeous, full Mass with readings Jonathan chose so as not to repeat any from his first wedding. The quick trip to the local hotel where we danced the night away, and the shuttle ride the next morning out to the airport for our honeymoon. I had wanted somewhere warm, but the first Mrs. Roberts insisted on Hawaii, so I settled for a weekend in a Colorado mountain town. We rented a 2-bedroom condo with a huge jetted tub. We spent most of the weekend there, but Jonathan had insisted we step out to do some shopping, to eat a good meal, and drink a good glass of wine. See, that's the thing about Jonathan. When he's got his eyes locked on yours, that enticing bite of elk steak balanced on the edge of his fork, you'd do anything for him. I know I did. Do you know how long it took for Sandy to tell me all about her? The first Mrs. Roberts, my brand spanking new mother-in-law, took me out to lunch a month after the wedding. We ordered an appetizer and sparkling drinks, and she launched into the story of the ghost who haunted my new husband's heart. I didn't even know your name until that day. It was Joanne. I was told Joanne was very pretty. She was a blonde with a slim waist and easy laugh. She wasn't close to her parents, so she clung to her new in-laws, coming to Sandy for advice every weekend over a glass of wine, to Leonard for help with her car troubles, which seemed to pop up nearly twice a month. That Joanne, she was apparently spectacular. She was the girl next door, literally. Sandy set up play dates on the regular between her son and Joanne when they were in elementary too. Rescue Joanne from her tragic home life. Have I mentioned that the first time I visited Jonathan's parents, they still had the old prom photo of the king and queen proudly displayed on the fireplace mantel? In fact, Sandy walked me over to it before dessert was even served. Don't worry, it was Joanne's favorite, pineapple upside cake. Jonathan told a different story of the first Mrs. Roberts. Did you know he only ever calls you the first? According to him, she was complicated and exhausting and a challenge. He always frowned when he spoke of her and held his chin in his hands, cleared his throat, or took another sip of red wine. So I dropped it. Joanne was always the hot poker of our marriage. The demand came a week after that letter. Jonathan locked eyes with me over coffee, scrambled eggs, and toast. He forbid me from going into the garage, saying, "I can't afford the payments on the storage unit. I've moved a box of her stuff into the garage. I don't want you getting hurt." I nodded and avoided that place like the plague, except last Sunday, when I stood in front of the garage door for 20 minutes before using the spare key we kept hung on the hook, shaped like a moose's antlers, to unlock it. Jonathan's car was gone since he went to the office for the day. His latest trial was scheduled for the next day, so some final details simply needed arranging. He had made me breakfast. There was even a little note bearing his love. I had been perfectly happy eating my meal. It wasn't until I turned on the shower that I even considered the garage. See, I was comfy and cozy in a steamy shower when all the lights went out. I screamed from panic and called out Jonathan's name several times before I vaguely remembered that our breaker panel was in the garage. So I rinsed quickly, dried more quickly, and threw on some leggings before heading outside. Yes, I considered calling Jonathan. Of course I did. I even considered calling my father, or father-in-law, or mother, or mother-in-law, or knocking on the doors of some friendly neighbors. But I figured I was not just a 25-year-old, but a married woman, a wife. If I was ever to become the mother Jonathan needed me to be for our children, I had better be able to switch a breaker. The garage was musty, dusty, gross. Some faint lines from dust remained on our cement floor, where Jonathan always parked his car. The huge freezer he received as a wedding present from my father didn't even whir. I grimaced and examined my scene. There was my bike, the one with the big blue basket that Jonathan had surprised me with for my first birthday with him. There were all of his hunting outfits. He hated when I called them outfits, but what else would I call them? There was his splitting axe, his felling axe, and his hand axe hung up on the wall. There was a tent we bought for our first anniversary. It made me smile, and in the corner were 3 black totes with yellow lids piled high on against a wall. But I could still make out the silver of the breaker panel, so I marched over and gently shoved them to the side. I could clearly see 2 switches weren't like the others, so I clicked them over. The freezer began to whir to life. I was left with a satisfied grin. You would have been proud. I hope we would have been friends in another life. The big sister, little sister dynamic I always prayed for. When I went to slide the totes back, the top one fell. I was left to clean up old photo albums of Jonathan's childhood. I had seen all of them before, but still paused to stroke the giggling face of Jonathan on his 10th birthday. Around him, balloons decorated the backyard. A huge cake in the shape of a cowboy hat had lit candles. And of course, the present table was overflowing. His little lips puckered as he blew out the candles. I could practically hear the squeals of excited children. I went to pile the tote back up, but decided to slide the 2 remaining totes back into place first, so as not to have the 3rd one fall again. As they were tucked back into place, I noticed the middle one wasn't quite sealed shut, so I went to close it, and found I couldn't. I heard the sound of Jonathan's voice chastising me. If you're gonna do anything, do it right, or don't do it at all. So I took the yellow lid off. Before me were all of Joanne's dresses. I recognized their bright colors from Sandy's photos. I found my hands sifting through them without the full consent of my mind. They felt smooth like water between my fingers, and I held them up to my chest, twirling in a dusty garage all alone. At the bottom of the tote was one final dress and a teddy bear. The dress was white with a blue flower pattern. I grabbed it and grimaced with a pounding heart, noticing the stains of blood in the center of the bust line, the tear where the weapon made its entrance and exit. Any woman who has endured her monthly visitor knows the color of dried blood. There was no excuse that he could come up with. It wasn't paint or food. It was blood. The bear bore the same markings, and I fell to the garage floor, Jonathan found me hours later. He picked me up, tutting as he went. He placed all of her dresses back in the box, but kept the teddy bear out. He sealed up the tote and helped me into the car. We drove in silence, the only light being from the full moon. Even if I had words, I don't know if my throat could make them. It had gone silent after the screaming and the crying. My exhausted eyes fluttered closed and didn't open until I could tell we had stopped, until I was certain we wouldn't start again, until I felt Jonathan's cool fingers stroking my hot cheek. He wore a sad face, like a clown without makeup. They start out so good, so kind, so loving. They promise to be good, but then they stop. They open letters not addressed to them, ask questions they shouldn't ask. He threw the new dress at me and returned minutes later to take me by one hand. He gave me the teddy for the other one. Our footsteps sounded so loud in the dried out grass and the silence of the graveyard. Until we arrived. I am the second Mrs. Roberts. I am standing at your grave in my very best black heels and little black dress. My sweaty hands clutch the brown teddy bear I found in an old dusty tote tucked in the corner of our old dusty garage. Jonathan smiles at me for the first time. He pulls out his gun. He leans in close. I close my eyes and taste his kiss one last time. The care and feeding of monsters. Via Sol looked around the mansion with distaste. She didn't like being here, and she certainly didn't like what she had heard about the monster who used to live here. Not that she put much credence in the old tales that some of the more senior members of the Lollipop Guild talked about. Those wizened relics of the past had many tales to tell. All the stories outrageous, and all the events sounding just a little too fantastic to believe. Via poked around the foyer and the living area, marveling at the size of the place and grimacing at the thick coat of grime and dust that covered every surface. She had drawn back every curtain on the ground floor, yet the area remained dark and suffocating. Curious, the high, vaulted ceilings spiraled upwards, seemingly without end, but the claustrophobic feeling stayed. The ancient wood creaked and groaned with every step she took, voicing its complaint in sonorous, funereal tones. She wanted to leave right now, but she had a prospective client. This place had been on the books for over 100 years, and getting it sold would be a major coup for her. She had visions of a corner office and a hefty bonus. The realtor overcame her fears and waited. But she waited outside, a wicked witch indeed. What ridiculous tripe! Franklin Baumgartner looked around the mansion. Via thought his eyes looked dead, but, she reasoned, That could be the effect of the poor light in the mansion. His assistant, a Miss Holcomb, also had a lifeless look about her. Their size bothered Via. The man towered over everyone in the land, standing almost 6 feet tall. The woman was a giant as well. Their attire was odd, and their actions startling. "Miss Holcomb, take some notes," Baumgartner snapped. Miss Holcomb dutifully took out a notepad and readied herself for the onslaught to come. Replace the windows, double-paned, insulated with argon gas. Make that triple-paned, American-made. Always buy American-made, Miss Holcomb. None of that Chinese shit. Get some people in here to reinforce the floorboards. They squeak like a bitchy wife. Cleaning crew. Make that cruise American cruise. Miss Holcomb pushed her glasses back on her face and peered up at her boss. "No, hire the illegals that come over here. They'll work cheap and do a good job. Remember, Miss Holcomb, buy American, hire foreign." "Got it, sir," Miss Holcomb said. She wrote rapidly and then paused, waiting for more. "Contact Kate Mueller in Chicago. Have her come in and furnish this place. Spare no expense. It's a fucking mausoleum right now. Get Halliburton to give me a call. I hear wolves out there. He's good at killing things. Gardeners, of course. Lots of them. The land has gone to hell. Oh, and I saw some beehives out there. Find me a beekeeper. If the bees aren't producing honey, we'll exterminate them. The roof needs to be checked." Baumgartner went on like this for some time. Miss Holcomb wrote furiously, nodding occasionally, and staying 6 feet behind her employer. Via Saul didn't show it, but she was confused and alarmed. She had never heard of the places mentioned. America, Canada, Chicago. The man also used language that was unfamiliar to her, especially the word beginning with a foo sound, or bitchy. Maybe it's their way of saying itchy. And maybe the foo word is a term of endearment. Via was snapped out of her reverie by Baumgartner's stentorian voice. "Miss Soul? Hey, you still with us?" Via looked up and almost stood at attention. "Of course, yes. So, the price? You have it listed as 133 lollipops. That must be a typo." Baumgartner frowned at her. He didn't approve of sloppy work. "No, sir, that's the price. But we can negotiate." "Lollipops?" "Yes, sir. I'm assuming that you can pay in lollipops." "Hell no, missy. We use good old American dollars. The best currency in the world, I'll have you know." "Lollipops? What the hell kind of lollipop do you require? Are they lined with gold?" Well, no. That is, they're just lollipops." Baumgartner looked at his assistant impassively. He blinked and shook his head. Miss Holcomb waited patiently for something to write down. "Show me," Baumgartner said. Via nodded, confused as to why someone needed to see what was widely considered the coin of the realm. She went outside to her horse and buggy, retrieving a couple of lollipops. She went back inside the mansion, not easy in her mind. Baumgartner stared at them for some time. He inspected them closely, twirled them in his fingers, and even sniffed them. He handed one to Miss Holcomb, who mimicked her boss's actions. Am I to understand that these lollipops are made with sugar? Nothing else? Just sugar and some natural coloring, I think. I'm not sure. The Lollipop Guild makes them, and they guard their secrets carefully. Baumgartner nodded. Although confused by the method of payment, he didn't hesitate to take advantage of the situation. What'll you take for these lollipops? Cash? Goods? Baumgartner eyed Via closely, noting her body language. He was successful in part because of his ability to read people. Well, I was going to purchase some new clothes after work. Food for the winter. Grain for the horse, Via said. She was nervous. The conversation about money bothered her. No one talked about money here. No one at all. Baumgartner considered what the realtor said. He whispered to his assistant. She nodded lightly and wrote something down on her notepad. Tell you what, Miss Soul, I'll bring you a new horse when I come back, if you give me one of these. Via gasped. A new horse would normally cost 7 lollipops. She tried to keep her composure. The man is an idiot. However, I could use a new horse. Poor old Rusty is getting old, and maybe I could get a little more out of this dolt. A new horse is acceptable, but I think I'd want a little more. Maybe throw in 100 kilos of grain for the new horse. Baumgartner accepted quickly. The woman's a dolt, selling this place for 133 lollipops, and all she wants is a new horse and some feed. Jesus, this is gonna be easy. We'll be back next week. Have the papers ready to sign. I'll have the, payment in full, Baumgartner said. He didn't even try to haggle over the price. He was starting to love this exchange rate. Baumgartner was as good as his word. He paid for the mansion and bought Via a new horse, along with supplying her with an impressive amount of grain for the horse. Still, Via was disturbed. The stranger found his way to her homeland. There were tales about a farm girl who had done this, but that was nothing more than a story that the old ones told. Baumgartner was indeed from another land. Kansas. His Aunt Elle had given him what was left of the family farm, and he sold it quickly, at a ridiculously low price. His aunt was dead. The farm was not a money-maker, and he hated farming. The only thing he kept was a pair of silver slippers, for they entranced him. In the light, they turned into a fiery, ruby-red color. Aunt Elle also told him that he could transport himself to a magical land by wearing the slippers and wishing himself to this nebulous place. The slippers were far too small to wear, and he didn't believe such nonsense anyway. One night, after drinking in excess, a particularly cheap and poor quality of a Chianti. He tried it. Frank found himself in the middle of a poppy field, staring at a city that seemed entirely made of green crystals. He took one of the crystals and closed his eyes again, wishing himself back home. Emeralds. The green crystals were emeralds. He made several trips like this and became rich. He also discovered streets made of gold bricks. He helped himself to plenty of these as well. When he returned, he found that the gold bricks and the emeralds had been replaced. Frank had no qualms about taking more emeralds and more gold from this place. None at all. Frank Baumgartner had found Oz. The inhabitants of the land that Baumgartner invaded were becoming unhappy with their new neighbor. He had a landing strip built for his private jet. The people thought it was a monstrous steel dragon and fled every time it landed or departed. The same emotions arose when Baumgartner drove his vehicle. To them, it was nothing more than an iron terror roaming through their land. Queen Ozma demanded that the stranger leave. He refused. She had no recourse to his refusal. No one had ever defied the queen before, so she was at a loss as to what to do. They had no police force, for there was no crime. They had no standing army, for they had no enemies. Until now, Baumgartner paid well in lollipops. This became a problem, a huge problem. The economy was turned upside down and inside out. Munchkins and Winkies, with newfound wealth, invaded Emerald City and bought up desirable plots of land and built houses. Baumgartner built several yellow-bricked roads that led to Emerald City, and the flood of country people to the city was unsustainable. The new royalty had been, just a short time before, farmers and craftsmen. The Lollipop Guild had been decimated by the influx of lollipops from Baumgartner. Inflation ran rampant. And then a recession hit. Everyone felt its effects, and the people of all 4 quadrants of the land found themselves struggling to survive. Baumgartner didn't care. He was rich in America, but here he was a god. He controlled the lands, the supply chains, the very fabric of life. Poverty became the new normal. "We have to do something!" Vaya slammed her fist on the table. The Munchkins looked at her with surprise and consternation. She had never been so demonstrative. Via Sol had always been the epitome of grace and charm. Goru stood up, though it made little difference in his height relative to everyone else. He was short, even for a Munchkin, but he commanded respect. The eldest member of the Lollipop Guild had been Goro for the past 70 years, and his word meant something. "I have a solution, but you aren't going to like it," he said. A quietness overtook the room. If Gora said that it would be displeasing, then it would be very displeasing. The council braced itself. Goro outlined his plan. Everyone was horrified, but they agreed to it. Effie sensed the munchkin well before he came into sight. She sniffed the air and smelled fear, desperation, sadness. Goro stopped short when he saw Effie. It had been 20 years since she had been banished to the edge of Munchkin Land. Although he had voted against the banishment, he still felt a thrill of fear. Effie was dangerous. All her kind were dangerous. What brings the great and powerful Gora to my humble shack? Effie picked up a snake and stroked it gently before putting it back on the ground and giving it a shove with her toe. The snake slithered off into the underbrush, looking for a meal. A stranger from the outer lands. A bad person, Effie. Very bad. We need your help, Goro said, looking down. He was afraid to meet Effie's eyes. I have no quarrel with you, Gora. You didn't vote against me when I was banished. But why should I help? I was exiled because of my grandmother. Goro nodded. She was right. She had no reason to help. But I will, Effie said softly, because the stranger has something of mine. Goro looked at her, surprised. You know about the stranger. I may be restricted to the edge of the desert, but I hear things, she said. Because the animals tell me. Goro believed her. Effie's grandmother understood the animals. I'll come to the council next week, when it's over. I'll want something in return, though. Goro nodded. He was empowered to agree to almost anything. What? Effie looked at Gora and smiled. It was a beautiful smile, so unlike her grandmother's wicked leer. My grandmother's old house. Goro expected this. He nodded, and then he left as quickly as possible. The edge of the desert frightened him, and Effie frightened him most of all. He thought of a saying he had heard long ago, needs must when the devil drives. He would wonder, years later, who the devil really was. Effie flew above the trees on her umbrella, scanning the countryside. She knew the area well, for she had been raised in Winky country. Her old house looked different, modern and bright. She hated it. A portly man came outside and looked around, hands on hips. Effie's tremendous sight allowed her to see him clearly. He had a mug look on his face. Odd clothes covered his portly frame, and he was smoking a cigar. Effie banked sharply and flew toward the man. He finally spotted her and stared at her in surprise and fear. She saw his eyes widen. He screamed just as her umbrella penetrated his heart. The umbrella settled gently on the ground as Effie stepped off. She strode to the man and took the briefcase. She had what she wanted. She had what belonged to her. We have to do something, Vaya said miserably. She didn't slam her hand on the table as she had done all those years ago, but the tone of her voice revealed her desperation. Goru and the rest of the council agreed. Effie had been a hero 20 years ago when she killed the giant stranger and everyone else in her grandmother's old house. The land was freed from the bonds of American capitalism and its monstrous ways. Now, however, she was as her grandmother had been, wicked and controlling. The flying monkeys were back, as were the giant white wolves and the huge black bees. They had gotten so used to smallish wolves and gentle honeybees that the new, more dangerous versions were even more frightening than ever. What can we do? We made a deal, and she took advantage. Goru talked quietly, as usual, but his voice was tinged with defeat. He saw no way out. It's like the old days, he continued, when her grandmother ruled Winkyland. But worse. Effie seems to have a vendetta against us. So, we're sunk. Back to the way things were in the old days, and no stupid farm girl to bail us out, another member said. Where did she come from? Kansas? Where the hell is that? Vaya was willing to travel past the deserts if need be. Somewhere over the rainbows, Vaya. Somewhere we can't reach. Effie sat in her darkened mansion and smiled, stroking the fur of a wolf and listening to the angry buzzing of the black bees flitting about her abode. She had reclaimed her family power. The witch still remembered the day her mother died. She had been behind a curtain when the incident occurred, watching the events unfold. When the strange girl doused her mother with water, she gasped. Her mother melted in front of her eyes. Effie had never seen such a gruesome sight in her life. But that wasn't the end of the bad news. She had been banished to the edge of the desert, though the council that banished her knew full well that she would, in all probability, die from this. The only member to vote in her favor was Gora. Effie, though, had been taught how to survive by her mother. She flourished. Her hate grew. And then another stranger showed up, and with the magical slippers, her mother's slippers, and the last remaining source of all witchy power. Just a pair of shoes, silver. But they fit her feet perfectly, almost like they were made for her. Now that she was the only living witch in Oz, she could rule all the lands, not just Winkyland. There was a new ruler of the land, and she wasn't about to forget what the inhabitants had done to her or her mother. Effie scanned the skies for flying houses. It wouldn't do to neglect the lessons from the past. She grabbed her umbrella and took off across the land, flying low and fast, observing her domain. Effie was on her way to Emerald City to depose the queen. She has a date with the point of my umbrella today. I look forward to the smell of royal blood spilled on the streets of Emerald City. My only regret is that she can't melt like my mother did. Effie flew on, over poppy fields and verdant landscape. Evil had returned to Oz. The monster they all feared was a woman with silver slippers on her feet and hate in her heart. The queen has an expiration date. Evil has no such restriction. The final petition of the beast. I trust that your patience and historically proven aptitude for distilling the truth of events from the muddled fog of contentious viewpoints will inhibit you from leaping to a firm and resolute condemnation of my actions until you hear me out to the full. Let us see if I cannot, in time, convince you of my benevolence by offering another perspective on the events which preceded my downfall and which led me to assume this sorrowful state in which you now observe me. A perspective which, I hasten to warn you, runs contrary on many points to those you have, no doubt, already encountered. In exchange for your borrowed time, I promise to inform you of what really happened regarding a topic we can agree truly matters: the well-being of none other than my human host. The rumors you have heard are true. I am soldered by mechanisms far beyond the understanding of the human sciences in an intimate manner to the psychological tendencies of the human mind. I must again plead with you to discard your prescribed opinions regarding this arrangement of living. Any beast or person misunderstood will stand by me, and perhaps you also will join us in testifying that the misunderstood are always critiqued with unwarranted harshness. I have borne the most hideous names hurled at me by those who fear and misunderstand of my role. I have gone by many disparaging titles throughout history, and am only too aware of the multitude of unsavory images attached to the notion of a parasitic relationship. May I suggest as a substitute for this baseless hatred the fondness of a pet for its owner? After all, I do more than leech. Like your beloved animal companions, I am also capable of altering the mood of my host, as you shall soon see. My host was a young boy when I transferred myself from his parents' minds to his. His psychological foundations had been set years before, and I arrived to find a habitat much to my liking. Between the folds of his thoughts, I made myself a home. I had left a part of me behind, of course, in the minds of the parents. Their family had served me for generations, and it was a light task for one as skilled as I in the art of suggestion, and in possession of such intimate knowledge of their inner workings, to fan the mother's insecurities, just so that, while remaining completely imperceptible to their untrained eye, my little whispers achieved nothing short of the legal separation of the boy's parents. I then secured my spot in the boy's mind by magnifying his sense of responsibility for his parents' misery. Thenceforward, the slightest reminder that he was unlovable had him wriggling deliciously in my grasp. It was thus, with my claws sunk deep into his skull that I ushered him into high school. His emotional trajectory was the most promising of all his dear family members, yet not a single friend he made the first month of school. The very weight of me crumpled his posture as he wandered, friendless, through the halls. I steered his mood between the Scylla of an overly morose disposition, certain to be noticed by peers and trigger the arrival of help in the form of a school counselor or therapist, and the Charybdis of an optimism that would grant him the strength to shrug me off. I would have achieved this ideal flawlessly were it not for that damned girl who transferred to his school and was placed catastrophically in the seat across from my host. Were she my charge, I would have doubled down on her insecurities at the first sign of that cheerful, infectious laugh and blasphemously pristine, consistent mood. If not out of a sense of duty to myself, then out of respect for my colleagues, who work so hard to keep precisely her sort of energy away from the vicinity of our hosts. Before the week was out, the boy was going home, smiling to himself at the memory of their last conversation. Thankfully, I had conditioned him in preparation for such catastrophes. The reminder of the tension that awaited him at home when he stepped off the bus was enough to lull his mind back to its usual state of a miserable hibernation. Yet I knew this girl was no patch of sun or tasty treat. She was here to stay. It frightened me how deftly she slipped under my nose. After generations of thankless, uphill labor, I was faced with the prospect of relinquishing all in submission to her smile. The memory of the warm undertones that bubbled up from deep within the boy at the memory of her smile causes me still to shudder. I irked him. I belittled him. I downright scolded him in my best imitation of his father's voice for his cheek. You can imagine, then, my shock when he steeled his nerve and neglected to drink from the sweet stream of self-pity I offered him. He told me himself that this girl was worth the pain, a revelation that gave me a most unpleasant shock. For centuries, my strategy had been to capitalize on the self-pity of my hosts by maintaining their focus entirely and crushingly on themselves. The bitterness this tactic unfailingly produces kept his parents under my thumb until their separation. I expected the same trap would ensnare their child also, but my suggestions fell suddenly on deaf ears. He had a drive to know this girl, and his deep-set belief that he was essentially unloved and unlovable did nothing to curb his momentum. In all my carefully executed precautions, I had not foreseen his sexual drive would rear its head in this manner. I chastise myself for the mistake. Had I studied more carefully the behavioral patterns of his father, molded my contraptions to better accommodate the boy's hereditary quirks, I might have prevented this disaster from transferring. As it stands, the animal drive to reproduce is, like me, powerful and resilient, and cannot be permanently subdued, only temporarily diminished. He surprised even himself, I think, at his boldness and forwardness, looking back on what he did next. During a break in class came the briefest of silences, pregnant with the potential for shadow-shattering community. And then he spoke, and at that moment I perceived within myself a distinct and piercing horror that stemmed from the sudden realization that my source of life had suddenly begun to slip away, like sand. No, like water, between my sharpened claws. The boy and the girl talked on stools in the back of the classroom, opposite the wide windows, with the morning sun on their faces. His willingness to reveal his most intimate thoughts, including those I had pointedly enforced on him to be the cause of his unlovableness, to this girl, a near total stranger to him, unknown less than a week ago. It frightened me. So I bit him hard on the tip of his ear. It was too risky, you see, to allow a conversation of that nature to continue. They might have begun to discuss me, the boy's negative self-talk, and he might have let the cat out of the bag and deprived me of the strength that secrecy affords. He was still grimacing from the pinch of the memory of some past embarrassment when the teacher resumed class. But the girl looked worryingly at him, and I at her, for I knew the fight was far from won. Before I continue, I feel compelled to address my apparent neglect of the rules. You must understand, taking into account the urgency of my case, why it was necessary for me to inflict more than merely psychological torment on my host. Consider the goal I had to achieve. If the result of my admittedly brash action was the immediate embarrassment, the later regret, and the plummeted social confidence of my host, 3 dimensions firmly underneath my jurisdiction, can the rules really be said to have been abandoned? Even so, I trust you to keep the details of my misstep within the sphere of your knowledge, and mine only. That afternoon, the boy flopped onto bed, and I robotically conjured his usual evening diet of social comparison and self-loathing that bites so poignantly on the teenage psyche. I had just settled in for a mellow evening of brooding and isolation when the boy received a friend request from the girl. Soon they were volleying messages happily like 2 ducks in a pond. I spewed my most horrid concoction of degrading insults in his ear, but the boy took even my most clever and piercing threats and told them to her verbatim as I had whispered them to him. The stupid boy believed my work to be a product of his own imagination, but the untruth of his utterances was instantly checked by the girl. and the secret of my existence was out. I felt the shame and secrecy drain from his mind like the contents of a filthy toilet, all at once unclogged. You would have screamed too if you had been there. Your life's work transformed in an instant to shining acceptance and relief. She urged him to speak with the school counselor on Monday and walked him down to the counseling office herself when I attempted to undermine the urgency of his plight. I found us face to face with my old host, whose emotions I could not comprehend nearly as well from this side of his face. The counselor did not return my fiery gaze, although he noticed me the moment we stepped into his office, but gave the boy a long, sad look. I see what's happening here. Do I need antidepressants, sir? Asked my host. Oh no, just a daily dose of self-acceptance. If I have revealed too much of myself and my motivations, so that you look down upon me as the villain of this tale, believe me now when I tell you I have done so for a special purpose. For do I not also possess those same heroic traits of determination, bravery, creativity in my methods, and consistency in my effort, all in service to the biological imperative to survive and reproduce, for which you applaud and congratulate the boy? What does it matter, really, if my methods are unconventional, my form perhaps shocking to you, my feeding style abnormal? I would caution you against delivering judgments colored so heavily by dislike for the unfamiliar and the unknown. What is the difference between me, who seek to preserve my existence by any means, even the grossest, and him, who takes the opinion of his friend into account before making a decision to the same end and purpose? I assure you, it is a difference, not in type, but in degree only. He fought harder, more ruthlessly than I, and so he has won. I, who held the boy's leash, now cower, packed away and forgotten, in a dark and lonely corner of his mind. He does not visit or feed me, except occasionally, and by accident. My strength is waned, my spirit is dehydrated, my form considerably shrunken. With the addition of communal support, that loathsome girl had friends and introduced them to him. I doubt I shall ever drink from the boy's vitality again. What pains me most is the thought that his and her children will be reared without the guiding influence of my whispers on their young minds. I will be hard-pressed to imitate to his children the voice of their father when they have not been primed for years with the backdrop of his incessant complaints. The boy has abandoned me. I shiver, cold and alone. But you are still here, warm and receptive, believing in the truth of my whispers, attentive to my voice. You will let me in, won't you? The sculptor of Lyon, Jacques heard someone enter his fifth-floor studio, heard the heavy groan of the old wood door, heard the tired thing thunder back into place, slamming with a finality that said no more. And it was the only thing that stopped him from pitching forward from his balcony into the street below. Rich heels snapped against the scuffed parquet floor, and the boards underneath strained against the weight of every step the stranger took. "Hello?" came a man's voice. Jacques relit his cigarette for the fourth time and looked out over Lyon. His studio was the top floor of a tower, sitting in the crook of the Saône, and he had a lovely view of the Pont de la Feuillée. They still called it the New Bridge, even though it had been reconstructed nearly a decade ago, in 1841. He could just see one of his lions from this angle, a stoic beast carved of marble, watching over the people of the city as they crossed the bridge. One of his first commissions. "Hello?" came the man's voice again. It was curious but calm, familiar but unrecognizable, a voice that tugged at his memories and hid at the corner of his eye. Jacques huffed. If he should fall from his balcony, he'd tumble 5 floors and strike the cobble below. With luck, head first. But it would leave a mess for his landlady. And besides, he had company. Ah, but the Pont de la Feuillée. If he snuck out at night, he might throw himself to the mercy of the Saône and let it wash away the grayness of his life. "Hello? Jacques? Out here." He flicked the last of his cigarette over the railing. On the balcony, the steps drew close, and only once Jacques felt the presence of another beside him did he turn. And Jacques, startled, beside him stood a man dressed head to toe in rich reds and blacks, accented with gold buttons and chains and jewelry. His boots were buckled with gold. His hands were covered in black satin gloves, and upon his head sat a broad-rimmed hat with a white feather in the band. The clothes screamed wealth, if not style, though perhaps they whispered a style to come. "Monsieur Desrosiers." Jacques cleared his throat. "Pardon me, sir, but I was not expecting you." "No matter." Monsieur Desrosiers smiled and patted Jacques on the shoulder. "I've come to take a look on my commission." Something cold shifted in Jacques' bowels. The commission. It was the one thing he didn't want to think about, and the one thing he couldn't stop thinking about. It was beautiful. It was hideous. And for better and worse, it was the only thing that kept him alive. If it hadn't been for the chance encounter with Monsieur Desrosiers 3 months ago, on a moonless, foggy night, when Jacques planned to get well drunk and then to go looking for trouble, whether in the dark alleys of Lyon, or in the waters of the Saône, or by means of the loaded pistol he kept in his pocket, he might finally have been done with it all. But when they ran into each other, just outside Fournier's. Monsieur Desrosiers insisted they enter the bar and share wine, and when Jacques told him of his misery, of his heartache, of giving up, Monsieur Desrosiers insisted further. "I can't do it anymore," Jacques said. "Every breath I draw is torture. All I want is to hold her again, to feel her skin against mine. There's no greater pain than that of the heart," said Monsieur Desrosiers. "But this is the well from which we draw art. Tell me, what do you intend to do with the piece?" "I don't know. I will smash it." "Impossible," Monsieur Desrosiers said. There was no alarm in his voice, just a statement of fact. "I'll not hear another word. I'm commissioning you to finish it." And the price he offered, coupled with the wine, was not something Jacques could refuse. Jacques lit another cigarette. "This way, sir." He took his patron to his workshop, a dusty place filled with statuettes, busts, blocks of various stones, and wooden frames, a place dominated by a column of a man's height, covered by a white cloth that promised severe edges. A stool sat before it, and hammers and chisels littered the floor, scattered like afterthoughts. "Show me," said Monsieur Desrosiers, circling the covered statue. "It's not finished." "It cannot possibly be finished. Art never is." "Reveal it. It's grotesque. A cruel mockery. Impossible. Your hands are magical. They sing to the stone. Come, do not keep me waiting." Jacques tarried only a moment longer, and then listlessly he pulled at the cloth. There was a radiant guile. "Marvelous," said Monsieur Desrosiers. "She's simply magnificent." He touched the cold marble, placed his hands on the midriff, ran his palm up the perfectly smooth abdomen, cupped an ice-cold breast. Jacques felt his throat harden. Said Monsieur Desrosiers, his thumb and forefinger cradling a nipple. "Such attention to detail. So like the real thing." His hand slid to the abdomen again, and then began sliding lower, following her contours, following the map of her muscles and flesh. Lower, ever lower. "Sir." Jacques grabbed the other's hand. "Sir, please. It's unfinished. Very delicate." Monsieur Desrosiers locked eyes with him for just a moment, but then a wide grin bloomed on his face. Of course! How boorish of me to interfere with the genesis of art. But I tell you, you have made an exquisite piece here. It's so like life." Jacques felt the cold in his guts roil. He beheld the work that consumed him, the statue of Camille, the torso of Camille, rather. She stood on the stumps of her hips, and she had no arms. Neither had he been able to bring himself to carving her head, her precious face. Not yet. Not ever, perhaps, but lifelike? Yes, Jacques had to admit that was true. He knew the map of her. His fingers had traced her every path, and he'd drunk deeply of her, gotten lost in her shallows. He couldn't count the nights they'd spent in soft embrace, or the fervent daylight moments they'd stolen together. There was no greater love, he knew, and she was forevermore his heart. It was Monsieur Desrosiers that had introduced them. Monsieur Desrosiers, his enigmatic patron, the man who discovered Jacques, who secured his first commissions and helped him build a name for himself. The man convinced of magic hands, convinced that there was nothing they could not sculpt. The man who knew very well what he was doing when he brought Jacques and Camille together, and then left them alone. Ah, but this cold, dead stone, it merely looked like Camille once, looked like her before her death, before her murder. It was hard and unyielding, and had none of the vibrant warmth of the real thing, of his muse. This was a horrid effigy, and no more. You have outdone yourself, Monsieur Desrosiers said. Truly, your work honors my niece. It's unfinished, Jacques whispered. I have a hunch it soon will be. I've a sense for these things, as you know. No magic hands myself, but a sense about art, yes. Now come, we will celebrate your progress and looming breakthrough. Monsieur Desrosiers brought libations. They started with wine and moved on to absinthe, and all the while, Monsieur Desrosiers talked about his views on art, and how through it, he firmly believed, man could pierce the veil through force of will alone, he said, to create, like God. Jacques' vision swam, but Monsieur Desrosiers seemed cogent, no matter how much he downed. But the conditions must be right. We must truly want it, as only the empty heart of the artist wants. Soon, Monsieur Desrosiers said, you are my most prized sculptor in all of my stables. Soon you will prevail. I don't doubt it. Now, I leave you to it. Jacques finished what remained of the bottles after his guest departed, deep in the black of night. The man was strange, and always appeared at just the right time, or just the wrong time. It was M. Desrosiers that introduced him to Camille, and then later introduced him to the news of her death. It was he that found her, strangled, they said, among the rose bushes on the family estate. The murderer never found. It was he. Jacques didn't know if it was he. M. Desrosiers was the last to see her alive. That didn't mean anything. Besides, it was disrespectful to harbor such suspicions about the man who funded him. Besides, it was too terrible to consider if Monsieur Desrosiers had played a role. If instead of doing something about it, Jacques had merely taken those funds. Jacques downed the rest of the absinthe and settled into fitful, fanciful dreams. In his mind, Camille came back to him. He embraced her statue, and in the moonlight, she turned into his lost love. They danced through the night and laughed, and he twirled her faster and faster. 1,000 questions filled his mind. How had she returned? What was the other side like? Did she still love him? Did she know he still loved her? But all were strangled by his pressing need to hold her, to have her. They loved like it was their last day, their first day, their only day. And he fell asleep in her embrace, tangled in sheets, feeling the warmth of her touch once more. By morning, that touch had grown cold. He awoke to a piercing headache and found himself draped over the unfinished statue, the headless, faceless cadaver, the armless and legless corpse, the pale imitation of a woman whose voice he could barely remember, whose touch he craved more than breath itself. Cold, 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 but soft. He gripped her shoulder and found his fingers sank into the marble, deformed it like skin. Gray skin, pallid skin, and webbed with dark veins, nearly black. He rose to sit, tried to lift her, and found she bent backwards, as though she had a spine, as though she were flesh, dead flesh. Jacques recoiled, swore. What was this? He wondered. Was this the drink? Had his mind finally broken? That was when he noticed himself sinking into his bed, his sheets, bunched in his tightly closed fist, had themselves grown soft and veiny and covered in irregular tufts of hair. And the bed, a large slab of fibrous meat, heaved under his weight. His other hand sunk into it, and something cracked. He pierced the surface, exposing a shattered, brittle bone and a gush of foul blood. Jacques screamed. The bed heaved under him as he leapt to the floor, and the parquet beneath his feet turned almost at once into a meshwork of impossible fingers, too long and too short, with too many joints, fused at all angles, all writhing and snapping and cracking under his panicked retreat. Every tool he touched turned into a shivering mass of malformed bone and sinew, screaming of wrongness, and every wall he stumbled into blossomed into a rippling bruise, a labyrinthine organ, a tortured thing filled with fluids. The air in his studio grew hot and moist, and blood and other things dribbled from 1,000 open sores. His shrieking unending, he charged for his door and the stairway beyond. But no sooner had he placed his hands on the heavy wood than it cracked into a wee of ribs, hiding a colossal, misshapen heart of dozens of chambers, each beating a deafening drum and spurting gore everywhere. Jacques turned and fled for his balcony. Too late. The balcony itself became a broad, lolling tongue which rolled back and kept him inside, and thousands of jagged, splintered teeth erupted from both the ceiling and the floor. The whole tower shuddered, ground against itself, writhed in fury and meaningless pain, and collapsed under its own weight. It pitched forward and splattered into the zone with a finality that said, "No more, vanish." I tried to be gentle. I tried to come to you slowly, revealing myself in fragments under the growing dimness of dusk. I stepped ever so carefully into the downward cast of the yellow street lamp's sepia light, sending forth first a finger, then a tentative but eager to caress hand. I moved so gently, so slowly, that I felt the cloak of darkness removed from my face, inch by inch, nose first, before there was no more hiding. I did this for you, as not to startle you. Didn't you see? I even smiled. Those sparks of kindness you all boast so easily, like the one you'd given me. And yet, you still screamed, shrieked even. A shrill shriek of survival, one of horror and fear, as if the very sight of me would be your upending. And how you ran, just took off, as if the wind came and swept you away, leaving no blame for yourself. I offered you my most sincere attempt at kindness, an approach akin to that of a person who wishes to greet a cute puppy. And how was it that you repaid me? Screaming and running away. Could you see how that would have made me angry? Do you understand why I had to do what I've done? All I'd ever wanted was to be with you, to be more like you. I just wanted to learn from you. If not for your outburst, things could have been different. I thought maybe you were different. I'd wanted you to be different. I'd hoped that you would be the one to accept me, welcome me, and show me what it was like to be like you. A glowing firefly in the night, leading me out of my solemn and lonely abyss. I thought you would be unlike the others, who'd taken one look at me and condemned me to hell with a snarl, thrusting a spear of fear between us like a barrier. Me and them, water and oil. Two things that could never mix. I'd hoped you'd be different. I hoped it with all the blood pumping in my chest. I thought you would see how much I'd longed for us to mix, and how much I dreamt of the opening of your arms, wide, like I'd watched you do to so many others around you. Even that bowling ball of a man I saw you squishing faces with, his arms barely able to stretch around his own belly to wrap around you as you rocked slowly together behind your bedroom window. It was such a wonder to me how he was not greeted as I was, what with the cruel things I'd seen him doing. I'd wondered how the fear would gleam in your eyes once you'd finally learned the truth about the man you let stay in your bed. all those dirty and lustful glances he'd given the children at the park when you were not around, telling you he had late meetings so he could take the long way and feed his devilish desires, window shopping the younglings as they played. Yet you did not look at him as the foul and disgusting monster he was. Instead, it was I with whom you'd shown such disgust and foulness, a violent terror shooting through those eyes at my unveiling this evening. You were certainly not how I'd hoped you would be. You were just like the others, who saw my burned and battered face, the scarred and charred mask of skin I'd been forced to present. I saw the judgment glinting between your lashes, just like the rest of them. Monster, they'd called me, without even giving me a chance, without even a hello or a flicker of pity. Even that I would have understood, maybe even welcomed. Perhaps that was what I'd been missing. A sympathizing and tender outreach. A compassionate soul there to guide me towards the light. After all, darkness was all I had ever known, all I had ever seen, save for the blinding blaze of the flames my mother tossed me into, spouting about how I'd belonged in hell for devouring my twin brother before he'd had a chance. I'd heard people say, there is darkness in all of us. Perhaps I'd consumed all of my brother's when I took his life for my own. Perhaps we would have been all right if he'd not vanished before his first breath. Though perhaps not. What with the mother we had, he'd gotten the better end of the deal, I'd supposed. And what had mother expected? She, the tree. I, the apple. For years, I tried to be a good person. I tried to be anything but the sum of my scars. Tried to make friends. Tried to reach out. But you tell me how much of it one can take before he breaks. 1 year? 5 years? A decade? Try 3 decades. 30 years. Monster. You hear it enough, you start to believe it. No one gave me a chance. No one gave me the time of day. Just gruesome looks and disdained scowls. No hello nods passing on the streets or returned waves. No pleases and thank yous at the shops. Just flashes of fear and short silent submissions. Anything to end our interactions quickly. People saw me and sort of monster. So, I'd said, a monster? That's what you want? That's what you get. I'd decided I'd become the very thing deserving of those unpleasant greetings. I'd become the thing people always feared to be true, hiding away, seeking comfort in darkness, making nightmares a reality. What freedom, what relief to finally surrender to myself. Mother would have been proud, I'd thought, though I never did lift the pillow to find out. as she wiggled and writhed beneath my arms. Just a couple of minutes, Mother. You'll see your son soon. Even then, I wasn't convinced I was monstrous enough for her. After all, I'd done her a favor. Her death, my first, was much gentler than the ones who'd followed. The kindness I'd shown my mother was perhaps the last bit that existed in my body. Or, so I'd thought. The day that I met you enlivened a remaining ember I hadn't realized was still burning. There was a weak and muted flicker of something other than darkness that remained somewhere deep inside me, somewhere you were able to touch. Do you remember? That day at the coffee shop, your purple polka dot headband tied primly in a bow, your hair pulled back into a high bun with just a few curly strays dancing around the edges of your cheeks. How you'd actually smiled at me before asking for my order, and then how you'd thanked me once I'd paid, wishing me a good day. There was no grimace in your manner, no hesitation at my mutilated face. You were so pretty, so kind. Not like my mother, not like any of the others. How had I gone so many years without this perfect human? That is the most profound thing about darkness. Even a flash of light is enough to change the entire atmosphere. You were that light. So there was still goodness in the world. There was still hope for me, past be damned. You showed me that, and so I'd followed you home that day, and many of the days since then. I watched you. I protected you, like the rarity that you were. I tried to preserve your kindness, study it, waiting in the shadows for our next encounter. And when I'd discovered there was already a man in your life, I'd followed him, too. I had to make sure you were safe, that no one was threatening your goodness, as if your light was already spreading to me, the way fire always does. I cared for you by taking care of him. There was no room for a pedophile in your life. He was a threat to you, a rapid of white waters sure to extinguish you. I couldn't let that happen, but after he was gone, you disappeared. The next day, when I went into the coffee house, hoping to see you, expecting to see you, sparkling with relief and joy, for finally you were free. I did that. I'd envisioned it many times, me waltzing into your shop, you ready with open arms to thank me. Me, your savior. You, my savior. But you were not there. Then, or the next day, or the next. Where were you? I watched outside your house, the lights going on in the morning, then off as the evening turned to night. But you did not leave. You'd disappeared in plain sight, left me alone, locked yourself up in your house, as if freedom meant absolutely nothing to you. Had it been one more day out there waiting, I'll admit, I'm not sure I could have forgiven you for such ingratitude. So, you can imagine my delight when you stepped out for a walk this evening, the horizon still bleeding its last drops into the twilight, like a sign. You, my last dash of hope. Monster, they'd called me. They, but not you. So, why then did you scream? Why such a vile and repulsive response at the sight of me as I stepped out into the light to greet you? What had changed between our first meeting? I did not take you for flighty. And yet, you'd made my breath go raspy and harsh in our chase, as if I were a wolf and you, a delectable lamb. I'd only wished to greet you, to reacquaint ourselves after our unbearable separation, to refortify the promise of our union. That was the moment I'd realized it. Those endless, suffocating seconds. You were just like the others. There was no light in you at all. You saw me as they did. Monster, imagine the anger. Imagine the betrayal. I'd only ever wanted to be with you, to be more like you. But oh, how you fooled me. You were much harder to carry to the car than I'd thought you'd be. And you certainly had a strong and fiery fight in you. I suppose that was the light I thought I'd seen. Because looking at you now as you lay on my table, there is neither life nor light behind those bright, unblinking eyes, behind closed doors. Have you seen this boy? The woman behind the chained door shook her head at the creased photograph. He's 6 here, Anna urged, but he's closer to 8 now. Ain't seen him. Sorry, truly I am. The woman hung her head, closing the door. Anna had almost gotten used to it. The slamming doors, the constant barrage of no's, dejected looks momentarily sharing her horror. Then straight back to daily life with the squeak of a hinge and the click of a lock. That's just what normal people do. Life goes on, for most. Times she wished she could close the door on it, say goodbye, give up. But what kind of mother would that make her? Sliding the photo into her inside jacket pocket, she pressed it to her chest, where he belonged. Men huddled on the apartment steps, threw dice, and glared at her as she left. Women shouting from sash windows at kids playing on the street shook their heads at the sight of her. Sorrow? Pity? Repulsion? She didn't know, nor care. By reputation alone, most everyone in Hartsville knew her, or of her. She'd become as much a lost soul as little Jimmy, except no one hunted for her. Not anymore. Released without substantial evidence is how the lawyers explained it. Not innocent, not guilty, somewhere in between, and cast into the worst court of them all, the public. Half the town and all her family blamed her for Jimmy's disappearance, and half again thought she murdered him. Some things just don't rub out after printing. Drawing deep from a cigarette, she leaned against the rust bucket she called a car. And home, its windows crowded with the few possessions her former husband allowed her to have. Gazing up and down the street, she considered how much longer she could do this. How many more shoes could she wear through? How many... Hey, you. Anna turned, searching for the smooth voice. A tall figure lurked in the alleyway opposite, features hidden by the descending sun, intentions none the plainer. Cocking an eyebrow, she pointed to her chest. Yeah, you. Come here. Waving her over, he disappeared into the poster-tattered passage. Discarding the cigarette, she made a show of tucking her 4-day, fresh, white tank top into her equally dirty jeans. In reality, she ran a hand under her cargo jacket, making sure the snub nose would be easy to pull. Only a fool came into the devil's basement, as the locals called it, unready, unprotected, or more worrying, unwilling to do what might be needed to be done. Steadying her breathing, she edged between the cars and made for the mystery man, standing at the other end now, 1 foot on the crumbling red brickwork, arms folded, eyes closed, his head tilted to the gathering clouds. What do you want? She asked, placing her hands on her hips. Not me. He didn't open his eyes. Well, who? Boss man. Should that mean something to me? Maybe. It doesn't. Now what's this about? He needs a job doing. Says you're the woman for it. Sorry. Don't do job interviews in back alleyways. She turned, throwing a dismissive wave over her shoulder. Here now, woman. Before you go, he wants you to have this. He extended a closed fist, finally opening his eyes. She stepped back, squinting in disbelief at his yellow stare, blazing like the midsummer sun. Nonetheless, curiosity sunk its teeth into her. What's that? A gift. If you like, more be waiting after a ride in that car down there. Nodding toward the perpendicular laneway, Anna leaned out, all cautious, like to spot a rumbling estate wagon. Who's in that? And where would it take me? Trust me, woman. You ain't going to care after you see this. He waggled his fist. She extended a shaking palm. His fingers unfurled. Her heart stopped, then hammered, temple thumping loud. Impossible. Stomach knotting, hairs spiked the length of her neck. How? Dizziness overcame her, faint, happy, angry. It was all too much. Tears welled as she lifted that tiny yellow watch. The one with the cracked Power Ranger face Jimmy flipped open and shut when he got nervous. Terrified of the answer, yet hoping it to be true, she turned it over. J.C. engraved on its back. Jimmy Crawford, her Jimmy. She took off before her reeling mind could catch up, and within seconds flung open the car door. She knew the kind of mother she was. Relentless, the bag over her head didn't scare her, nor the machete-wielding woman next to her. Not even the fact they'd been driving for at least an hour now. No. What scared her was herself. She just jumped without thinking. Anyone could have faked that watch. It was common knowledge he wore one the day he disappeared, but not the engraving Jimmy did with a nail. Or was it? She racked her memory. The car slowed to a stop. Another stop sign. Traffic. The cops? With a mechanical click, the doors unlocked, swung open, and someone seized her elbow. "Let's go, woman." Her bated breath gathered like dew under her nose. Stones crunched underfoot. Then a hinge complained, as what sounded like a heavy metal door groaned open. "There's steps here. Wouldn't it be easier to take this thing off?" Anna asked, trying to add a little unfelt humor to her voice. A sharp jab between her shoulders was the only reply. She didn't ask any more questions, humorous or not. The descent stretched impossibly long, like the moment you see a child falling, but are too slow to react. With each step, the heat grew inferno hot. Sweat matted her hair, dampened her talk, stung her eyes. Where were they taking her? What did they want? Another door opened. The stench of sweat and sewage hitting her harder than a bat. Then music, laughter, glasses clinking. Prodded onwards, silence fell in her wake. Pushed into a chair, she grunted. Canvas bag whipped from her head. She panted the stale air. The room flickered. Tiny flames dancing behind red glass scattered across a discord of tables. Everything blurred as if staring through a heat wave. Licking her lips, she tried making sense of the shapes. Like a head swelling adrenaline rush, everything stopped swaying and came rushing into sobering focus. Hunched over a curved counter, a man fished juicy maggots from a writhing jar, then dropped them, slurping into his toothless mouth. Two skeletal, thin women, wearing nothing but dog collars, curled at the feet of an obese man, rubbing goose fat through his hair. Young men howled at a geriatric pole dancer, whilst an amputee burn victim served curdled milk. All the while, a man on a small stage played dirty blues on a gore-splattered guitar, face a snarled rictus, fingers bloody stumps, vomit climbing her throat, blood draining from her face. She gripped the round table as a drowning man may grip driftwood. Jesus Christ, not quite. She spun to the chocolate, rich-voiced stranger opposite. He wore a smoldering cigar on thin lips, a sneer in his ember eyes, yellowish smoke drifting from flared nostrils. "You this boss, man?" He nodded. Courage boiled from the gun in her waistband. "Where's my boy?" Around. He waved a hand festooned with many rings across the debauchery on display. "You'll see him when the time's right, when the deal is done. He leaned from the shadows, elbows making the table creak. Prove it. Prove he's here. Yellow Eyes dropped a tattered ball of fabric into boss man waiting palm. Then he threw it at Anna. Unrolling that faded Superman t-shirt, her chin trembled. Jimmy's t-shirt. What happened to him? Did these people hurt him? She swallowed her fear and the urge to run. Jimmy was here. After 2 years, she finally found something. Something more terrifying than these foul bastards. Hope, what do you want? Where did you get this? She cuddled the disintegrating garment. No small talk? She held his burning gaze. Fair enough. He was wearing it when we found him. Where? Not far. Right under your nose, actually. A neighbor. A fucking what? She leapt up, anger hammering her chest. He held out his hands. Calm, Anna. I'm here to help, Anna. Help? Why? Let's say I've a soft spot for the innocent and outcast. He gestured to sit. She complied. Although it's not the only reason. You see, I provide a service to our little community of Hartville. And you? Well, you are 2 birds, 1 stone. Wouldn't it be nice to stop running? Get the vengeance you deserve. Vengeance? I just want my son. Please. Her voice broke, unstoppable tears falling. You'll want revenge. Boss man studied his nails without a care in the world. A local woman came to me, told me of a man, a terrible man, patrolling the local parks and schools. Said he was offering sweets and toys to her nieces to get into his van. Smart girls ran away. The police, however, did little. The law is weak that way. He paused, puffed his cigar, and blew smoke into Anna's face. So I sent some of my hounds. He nodded to Yellow Eyes and Machete, to rain some hell on this pervert. Thing is, it was clear that his house, his deviant prison, was being used by more than just him. A ring, as they say. We searched the premises, found poor Jimmy chained to a bed frame in the basement with 2 others, little more than malnourished sex dolls. Anna's stomach turned, terror and anger searing her insides. She wanted to hurt someone, anyone. A little torture goes a long way, Anna. Remove a little flesh, and tada. The pervert gave up the names of his accomplices. Would you like to know who they are? Jaw clenched. She hissed the word. Who? I'll give you 3 names. You do what needs to be done. You'll see your boy again. We have a deal? How will I get back here? I don't know. Levi will go with you. Yellow's eyes winked at her. So, is that a yes? No sooner had she agreed than that damn canvas bag was pulled over her head once more. Anna dove into the station wagon's back seat, ears ringing, heart thumping, throat choked with the metallic aftertaste of gunpowder. Levi smiled between the seats. Damn, Miss Crawford, you a cold bitch. No hesitation. He opens the door. And you just fucking drive already, Anna barked, balling the cuff of her jacket and rubbing at the crimson mottling her face. Ha, okay, you the boss tonight. Anna stared out the rear window at the tree-lined street and white picket fences speeding by, concerned neighbors stumbling into the road to investigate the woman, wailing over her husband's body at 46 Broken Ridge Avenue. Little did they know the service Anna just did for them. Eradicated suburban filth. First of 3, she rested the revolver on her knee. Somehow, it felt lighter, as if that one bullet carried away the weight of her suffering, her loss. But he wasn't lost. He was waiting for her. Something unexpected curled the edge of her lip. "You smiling, Miss Crawford?" Levi asked into the rearview mirror. "You are. Cold bitch. You're going to fit real nice." She shook her head, dismissing both comment and grin. "Who's next?" "Edward." "Calhoun." Anna repeated the name, tracking her finger down the apartment buzzer's nameplates. There you are. 2 short buzzes, a click, a cough, then, "Hello, who's there?" "Mr. Calhoun, sorry to disturb you." She already picked a name from those displayed. "This is Jessica Longstein. I've lost my key again. And you were the first to..." Yeah. The electrical hum of the magnetic release sent a chill down her spine. Not fear, but anticipation. 1 step closer to Jimmy, 4 flights of stairs. 1 long, worn, carpeted hallway. And she stood outside his peeling door. Patiently, she waited for a Latino couple to get on the elevator, then knocked, placing a hand over the spyglass. Floorboards groaned from within. A chain rattled, a bolt slid, and she found herself staring at a stout, unshaven man in his 50s, wearing a blue telecoms shirt. "What can I do for you, Missy?" "This is for Jimmy." His eyes stretched, fearful wide. At the name, the crazed redhead at his door, or the gun inches from his face. It didn't matter. Pull, click, bang. His last thoughts sprayed over the cracked plaster inside, his body collapsing as though its bones turned to mud. For a second, she watched him, hopeless, pathetic, no longer a danger. She breathed deep. 1 to go. "Miss Crawford, yo, Anna. Startling awake, she grabbed Levi's poking hand, blinked into focus, then looked about. She lay in the back of the car. A cul-de-sac of 2-story houses loomed outside, quiet with barely a light on, the moon hanging low, shimmering off their slate roofs. Anna stretched, cracked her neck, then shook her face. "How long were we driving? I can't believe I fell asleep." "It's the adrenaline. Big come down. Happens all the time. I took the long way here. Had to avoid prying eyes. That last one definitely got some flashing light attention. But this is it here, Miss Crawford." Levi pointed out the side window to a silhouetted, figured light by the glow of a computer screen, typing into the small hours. Anna sucked her teeth, sniffed, pulled the lapels of her jacket, then checked her gun. Dirty bastard was probably on some chat site, pretending to be a teen girl or some other filth. You ready? And willing, Anna answered, shuffling and gently closing the door. She caught sight of her reflection, frazzled and blood-specked, and an idea fizzled into being. She grabbed her arm, dragged her leg, and hobbled towards the downstairs window. It didn't take long for him to spot her. Taking off his glasses, he twitched the curtains. "Mister, please," she whimpered. "I went off the road, round the corner. I need..." Holding up a hand, he dashed from the room. A porch light sparked to life, and the front door opened. "You okay, lady? What the hell?" He spun, roaring, as the bullet tore through his shoulder. He tried dragging himself back across the perfectly manicured lawn, but it was useless. The hammer fell. Back of the head, he jerked, spasmed, fell still. It was done. She smiled, running back to the car. She could already feel Jimmy in her arms. Her sweet, innocent little Jimmy. The macabre cabaret garnered no interest this time around, and she stared straight at Boss Man when the canvas bag was removed. "My boy," she said, not a request, placing the revolver on the table before her. He smiled, swirled a glass of red wine, drank, then nodded to no one in particular. Eternity stretched out before her, biting her lip, fingers drumming the scarred tabletop. She couldn't quite believe it. She'd finally found him. Two great bulking necklace forms lumbered from the shadows, a metal box held between them. It thudded onto the table before her. Boss Man grinned, tapping its top. Giggles simmered behind her as she lifted the lid with trembling hands. Tears exploded, lip quivering, shoulders shaking. There was no mistaking it. Those cheekbones, large, hollow eyes, even the skin dried and rippled as it was. She touched his forehead, sweeping away a dirty blonde fringe, and kissed him. She pulled his cracking and snapping corpse into her arms, his jaw swinging open in one last horrific scream. Falling to her knees, she pressed him close to her chest, where he belonged. Why didn't you tell me?" she spluttered between sobs. "I said you'd see him again. Here you go." Laughter rose like hyenas on the hunt. The unwashed bodies pressing coffin close around her. "It's okay, honey," she whispered to her son, rocking back and forth. "I got the bastards. I got them. 2 of them, anyway," Boss Man sneered. "What?" I said there were accomplices. I didn't say all 3 were. You humans are so eager to jump to your worst instincts. Oh dear God. Oh God. He can't help you, Anna. We have a long-standing arrangement. He finished the wine with a lip smack. "Why are you doing this to me?" You're monsters, all of you. Boss Man leaned forward. Didn't I say I've a soft spot for the innocent? Poor Jimmy suffered because of you. You're the monster who left her 6-year-old son alone in the park whilst you scored some smack, she wailed. I'm clean now. It seemed pointless to try to explain. It wasn't going to bring him back. What the fuck are you? She roared. You know already. You've always known. And now you're mine, forevermore. To a cacophony of laughter, she lowered Jimmy's remains back into the metal box, slowly closed the squeaking hinge, said goodbye, and gave up. Her finger wrapped around the trigger, the barrel cold beneath her chin. Perhaps in death she could be a better kind of mother. See you soon, son. These old bones, flowery carvings, adorned the strangely shaped old furniture and caught Jacob's eye. Happy cherubs were encrusted with dust, and on the walls, the springtime imagery of oil paintings was draped in cobwebs, hanging like veils. The floorboards creaked, and the weight of dust and neglect hung everywhere. But still, Jacob couldn't help but explore and get lost in the place, looking for creepy old things and ghosts. At last, he made his way up to the attic, which was pierced here and there by shafts of dust-specked morning light shining through the windows. It was filled with boxes and countless old and broken things, and it smelled musty and faintly of the sweet smell of rot and aged tobacco. Altogether, the scent spoke of a long history and was not entirely unpleasant. Stacks of magazines were spilled on the ground, and a ratty mannequin was wearing a straw-colored blonde wig. On one side, a line of well-worn teddy bears of various sizes stared back at him. Suddenly, his foot slipped on something, and looking down, he saw the parchment-like paper of architectural diagrams lying buried under a thick layer of dust. Then, at a small desk nearby, a black and white photo album lay open, revealing pictures of distant relatives he had never heard of. All in all, it felt like a strange old museum filled with oddities from centuries past. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something truly creepy was indeed hidden here, and he wasn't sure that he wanted to play hide and seek with it. He was about to turn and leave when suddenly he felt goosebumps on his neck. He heard a girl's voice sweetly humming a song he did not know. Then he saw her playfully skipping towards him, wearing an old-fashioned dress. She shimmered transparently, light blue and opalescent. She was swinging her arms by her sides, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she peered at him. And somehow, he forgot to be afraid. Hi, my name's Jacob. Aren't you a ghost? He asked her, his brow furrowed. It's so very nice to meet you, Jacob. I'm Mildred, the little girl said elegantly, before curtsying. And yes, I am a ghost. Isn't it obvious? She added, with a teasing smirk that somehow got under his skin. Don't tease me. It's not every day that one meets a ghost. You know, that's true. And in my case, you can only see me on Halloween. It's when I get to play for just one day a year, Mildred said. And then she jumped up into the air, her ethereal substance warping and elongating, rapidly funneling into the ear of a nearby teddy bear. "Why, hello there," she said in a mock teddy bear voice, waving the bear's paw. "That's so cool," Jacob said. "Yes, it's quite fun. I can animate a lot of things. You want I should go into your parents' car next?" she asked, with a mischievous grin. "Nah, I don't think they'd appreciate that," Jacob said pensively. "But let's totally find other things to try." Then, as Mildred stepped out of the bear, Jacob paused a while before speaking. "Hey, why don't you come trick-or-treating with me tonight? You can use the biggest bear and pretend it's a costume. What a great idea. I can't believe I never thought of that. Or maybe I just never had anyone to go with," Mildred said, her expression growing bashful. "Well, you've got me now, Mildred. Jacob, come down. We're going to go visit the town," his mother called out from the floor below. "Hey, I'll be back real soon, okay?" Jacob said. "Right. I'll be here waiting for you," Mildred answered with a nod. Later in the day, it had grown dark, and Jacob came up the ladder, holding a lantern in one hand. "My mom's got a bunch of candles burning downstairs. She thought that it would be cool to use candles inside the pumpkins. Some of them are scented, but I hope you don't mind the smell. Your mom sounds pretty fun. And also, I can't smell, silly. I'm a ghost." "Right," Jacob said, slapping his forehead. "Hey, Jacob, I have a secret to show you. How about I show you my favorite toy?" Mildred skipped over to the back of the room and into a large chest hidden behind piles of boxes. The chest creaked open, and Jacob went over to see what was inside. He was taken aback at seeing an old skeleton. It seemed small, like a child's skeleton, and he realized this was where the sickly smell of rot had been coming from. "Mildred, is it yours?" Jacob asked, eyes wide open, his throat growing dry, and his pulse running a little faster. "Yes, it is. Unfortunately, I died here under circumstances most foul. It's why I'm a ghost haunting this place, you silly boy," she said teasingly. "But that was a long time ago. Since then, I've grown so bored, and this was one of my most fun toys. Truly, I've had such fun scaring people who saw me through the attic windows," she added with a giggle. "I guess that could be fun," Jacob said, unsure what to say. Then she continued, "But here, I'll show you. Now, don't you get spooked on me," she said, jumping into the skeleton. There was a sudden buzz of static electricity, and Jacob's lantern shut off. The room was now only lit by the otherworldly blue glow of the animated skeleton. "Isn't it fun and creepy?" he heard Mildred's voice say with a giggle, seeing the little girl's skeleton come out of the chest and walk towards him in the dark with a lurching gait. Jacob was seized with a sudden terror. Had she been friendly all along, just to lure him here and do goodness knew what to him? Jacob ran away, screaming and knocking things over. Immediately, the old bones clattered to the floor. "I didn't mean to scare you so much. Please, please come back," he heard Mildred's voice say with a whimper as he hurried down the attic steps. "Please, Jacob," he heard her beg again from further away, her voice no less desperate for being fainter. It was only with great effort that he finally screwed on his courage and came back up the ladder. His lantern was lit again when he carefully emerged into the attic. Finally, he saw Mildred waiting for him there, wiping ghostly tears from her cheeks, an apologetic look on her face. "I was so worried you wouldn't come back, and I'm so sorry for scaring you. I guess I came up with some strange games all by myself." "It's okay, and I'm so sorry you were lonely, Mildred. But now you've got me to talk to. Oh, won't you please come by and talk to me again later? I can still speak to you on other days, even though you won't be able to see me. I promise I'll come by as often as I can," Jacob said solemnly, and Mildred gave him a sweet smile. "Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Jacob," she said softly. "Wanna go trick-or-treating? Get into the bear, and I'll meet you outside in half an hour." "Deal," Mildred answered with a grin. Watchers. The asylum's security surveillance room was a claustrophobic chamber, adorned with peeling wallpaper, crumbling shelves stacked with aged records, a small wooden desk, and an uncomfortable metal chair that creaked under the most minute amount of weight. A single rotary dial telephone sat on the desk. A thick layer of dust covered every surface but the desk and chair. The dim overhead light bulb flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows across the aging linoleum floor that peeled in the corners. The centerpiece of this dilapidated room was a massive wall lined with outdated grayscale CCTV monitors. Each monitor displayed a different section of the asylum, a haunting panorama of deserted hallways, medical examination rooms furnished with rusting metal beds and equipment, large dining areas, office spaces, and various other rooms possibly used for forms of recreation. The monitors were ancient, relics of a bygone era. Their screens emitted a faint, sickly glow that seemed to exaggerate the shadows lurking in the corners of the room. The images displayed were grainy, distorted, and pixelated. A small handwritten label accompanied each screen, indicating the location of the video feed. The cameras themselves, once cutting-edge technology, were now obsolete and barely functional, occasionally losing connection for a few seconds at a time. The crackling audio of static from the occasional disconnected video feeds added to the eerie ambiance. It was as if the very essence of the asylum had seeped into the wires and circuits, imbuing an unsettling presence into the surveillance system. James was 2 hours into his new job and already regretted accepting the position. As a college dropout, struggling to make ends meet, the job posting for a part-time security surveillance officer with great pay was almost too good to be true. There were no certifications or education required to apply. The agency didn't even require any previous experience. The pay was nearly double the current minimum wage. The only downside to the posting had been the hours. From 9 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, James was surprised to find he was the only one to accept the position following the interview. Unwilling to let such a good paying opportunity pass, he agreed to all terms he was presented during his interview and had no follow-up questions of his own when asked. As such, he was hired on the spot and given the time and address of his first shift. Looking back, James realized he should have asked at least a few questions, such as where he would be working and why no one else had accepted the position following the interview. Lunaria Sanitarium, built in 1920, was nestled deep within the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The nearest city, taking at least an hour and a half by car, was Portland, Oregon. The hospital consisted of 3 separate buildings. The central 4-story building contained the medical rooms, recreational suites, and other administrative offices. Each 2-story wing building housed bedrooms with minimal furniture, a dining hall complete with rows of tables and chairs, and basements with locked holding rooms. Only the hallway leading to the doors for the holding rooms contained a camera in each basement. Every room in the sanitarium still contained original furniture from the time it was abandoned, as if all inhabitants simply left for the day and never returned. Vacated in the late 50s, the entire property was left untouched for nearly 7 decades. Courtyards, fields, and small farming patches were overgrown, nearly reclaimed by the forest whose land it was built upon. Despite the impending vegetation, the buildings themselves were surprisingly in good condition, despite the rust, mold, and rotting surfaces. Upon relieving the daytime officer at 9 o'clock, a gangly old man who provided no explanation of his duties other than not to fall asleep, James settled in for a long night. The metal chair behind the desk protested against his weight, and he made a mental note to bring a cushion for his next shift. Figuring he would need help staying awake and being kept from boredom, James brought a backpack stocked with snacks, energy drinks, his handheld gaming console, and a few books his sister had lent him. He had debated whether or not he would get in trouble for playing games or reading while on duty. But how hard could watching screens of empty rooms be? Surely he would get in more trouble for falling asleep rather than being partially distracted. Gaze darting between monitors on the wall before him, a sense of unease settled deep within his gut. The screens were grainy and out of focus, an occasional ripple in the feed, giving the effect of movement and catching his attention. The wall of monitors was so wide that he had trouble viewing every screen without having to turn his head, causing the screens of the opposite side to disappear from his focus entirely. As the minutes ticked by with no changes, James relaxed and pulled his gaming console from his pack. He kept the volume low, just in case, and was careful to peek at the screens between each level of his game. The few games he owned that didn't require internet connection quickly lost his interest. He glanced at the time on his cell phone. 10:30. An hour and a half into his shift, and he was already bored. As James reached for his backpack, the scratchy sound of static caught his attention. One of the screens in the top row, which was labeled East Wing Dining Hall, showed nothing but black, gray, and white interference. Heart leaping into his throat, James watched as the lines danced across the screen. Less than a handful of seconds later, the feed resumed, and he was presented again with long rows of tables and chairs. Breathing a sigh of relief, James slumped back into his chair, the metal groaning in protest. Waiting for his heart rate to settle, James took in the creepy aspects of the dining hall, showing through the feed. Long, wooden tables made up a majority of the space, looking to be made of one solid piece of wood. James could only imagine how heavy they must be. Chairs dotted the spaces between the tables, all pulled out and looked to have been haphazardly pushed around, a few even laying on their sides. In the far left corner of the room, a single door stood open, leading to the hallway beyond. James's attention fixated on the chairs. Had they been pushed out from the tables before? Racking his memory, he thought that they had been pushed in, not that he had paid any special attention to the small details. Clearing his thoughts with a shake of his head, he pulled one of his energy drinks out and popped the cap. Perhaps he just remembered wrong. While sipping the carbonated liquid energy, James pulled out a notebook and pen and began taking notes on the condition of each room, more for the peace of his own mind and to pass the time than any other reason. Resurgence to suggestion of domestic violence, general violence, and child abuse may cause offense. In the darkness of oblivion, now and as forever, swaths and waves of misery wash over me, disembodied, immutable and adrift. I should be at peace after all of this time on my own. But the sounds of suffering and pain continue to assault me, as they have done since I was delivered from one prison to another, tethered by the constraints of many others. Breathless, urgent cries like the bleating of sheep being slaughtered, high-pitched, keening wails like those of the wind as it peels itself apart, traversing caverns, tortured, lingering mules like that of rolling thunder, spidering across the land as it creeps closer, wolf-like howls, ass-like brays, childlike screams, incessant, never-ending, compounding, tormented peals of agony that consume all opposing sounds, of laughter and happiness, exultation and joy, sounds more pleasing to my phantom ears that I have lost the ability to focus on as I endure relentless grief, alone in the dark, forever, and I cannot take it anymore. Floating in this murky abyss, weightless, shapeless, my essence comprised of thought and thought alone, a suffocating river of suppressive shadows drags me on, carrying me through the bottomless mire like a tumbling avalanche of tar as I drop my defenses and commit to the cries of the dying, cries that break like waves crashing down on me from every direction, threatening to drag me under and smother me in swells of black bile, like the desperate wails of a girl, bawling in terror as an angered, drunken male calls her a waste, a drain, a worthless piece of shit like her mother, the grief-stricken sobs of a boy, begging for forgiveness as a female voice of authority, dripping with sadistic glee, tells him he's a sinner and must pay. The heart-rending shrieks of a woman, each one accompanied by a bellow of rage and a slap, thud, crack, whump, bang, the weakened pleas of a male, begging for release from the suffering he has been kept in for, as his feeble voice suggests. Many more days than he should have endured. The shrieks, the gasps, the whimpers, the whines, the moans, and the shouts. In various tones and languages, from all manner of people, male and female, young and old, near and far, all victims, all suffering, all being hurt to sate others' dark desires and insecurities, just as I was. And I cannot stand it anymore. Something, one of those screams, one of those anguished choruses of pain, acts as a trigger, a catalyst, the very last heartbreak I can bear. And for the first time in aeons, I move, or at least I think of moving, for I do not have a form I can manipulate, not in this realm, not on this plane of existence. So I do what I can in this collection of thoughts, being dragged through the rapids like soul silt, and imagine my consciousness rising, memories of arms and legs powering it up and onwards through the murk and the dark and the thick, churning sludge, the fast-flowing essence of nothing, up, through, out. I need to escape this torrent of torment, the one I've endured for so long. Ignoring it no longer works. Accepting it does not stave off nightmares. Pretending it isn't there serves no purpose. Not after all this time. Not when misery thrives, extends its field of influence, and grows stronger, spreading its cancer-like tendrils through every blessed part of creation, consuming and destroying all in its wake. I can offer a deaf ear no more. I must return. I must fight back. I must awake. And so my spirit rises, fighting against the current that has held me like a prison for so long. A prison within a prison, within multiple prisons. And I feel them all around me all at once, encasing me, holding me frozen in various guises. But prisons can be escaped. Cells can be made homes. Inmates can become wardens, and a world overrun by monsters needs a watchman. My thoughts of breaking free intensify. My visions of escaping this disabling psychic swamp take on more clarity. My imagination strengthens, and soon I can sense, feel, see the way out. The crusty underside to the surface of this chundering mass. My invisible arms reaching towards it. My non-existent fingers digging in, crumbling it like ash, and plunging through, slowing the flow of my conscience through raging waters of black noise. Imagined fingers, hands, and arms push through and out of the abyss, of the darkness, of the afterflow. And then, as I visualize a head and shoulders I haven't possessed in an eternity, breaking the surface, my multitude of prisons close around me, as my spirit flows into them, and I stiffen, I take shape. I assume form and size and weight. I feel and hear everything with more urgency and emotion than before, and then, slowly, painfully, as I strain to force vision into unseeing eyes crafted by others, dozens at first, then hundreds, I start to see, for the first time in so long, and my mind is assaulted by colors and shapes and sights of things I could never imagine and cannot at once comprehend. A world far removed from the one I remember. Unrecognizable, claustrophobic, insane. But that is not the worst part of this place. These places, these alien, inexplicable environments I find myself in, having slipped free of the all-consuming death flow. No, the worst part is the closer proximity to the soul-crushing sounds that engulf me in all my myriad of forms. The sources of these sounds draw my attention away from the confusion of all else. For as much as my surroundings may have altered with the passage of time, what has not changed, what can not change, is the vile, indisputable hatred and evil of man, bubbling up from the depths of the weakest of vessels, manifesting on the surface as depraved, abhorrent, hate-filled ignorance and scorn, to visit savagery on innocent victims. Victims I am now able to see, like the child cowering in the corner of a room, tears streaming down her face as a man, a parent, rants and raves and bangs fat fists on a table, a chipped wooden slab overladen with shiny metallic cylinders, some upright, others on their sides, others still twisted or crushed, like the woman, her clothing torn, her lip bloody, dark streaks running from eyes to chin, arms up to defend herself as a well-dressed male with a sneer on his lips and a glint in his eye swings a smooth, polished stick in her direction, laughing, taunting, telling her she's upset him for the last time, like the pimple-faced, heavy-set boy, sitting in the center of a room filled with tables and chairs, crying as one his own age stalks around him, laughing and spitting, kicking and punching his head like the nude male strapped to a wheeled bed, begging for his life in a concrete chamber illuminated by clacking, flickering light tubes, while a silent, masked individual stands by a table, selecting a serrated edge blade from a collection of knives, like the screaming baby in the cot, whose cries fall silent as a bleary-eyed woman drops a cushion, like the grime-covered girl chained to a wall, shrieking as her prison door opens and her captor shines a torch into her eyes, like the fear-stricken boy in the corner of a toy-filled room decorated with paintings of happy-looking characters in bright costumes, quivering and shaking as a wild-eyed banshee yells insults and curses and stomps like fear, pain, suffering in every location where my eyes have started to see, because these are the places I've been drawn to. These are the scenes that have called me, awakened me from my slumber, forced my hand, and begged me to return, to do something, to help these lost souls. And so I have, and so I will. But to do so, I need more than vision. To do so, I must be able to move. I need arms and legs I am unfamiliar with and have never used before to function. I need to remember how my own arms and legs worked when I had them, how I bent the knees and rotated the elbows, how I clenched my hands and flexed my fingers, how I stood on 2 feet and maintained balance. It's been so long since I had physical form in this plane of existence, and the memories return to me slowly. But return they do, as I force sensation into new limbs, limbs attached to bodies of various shapes and sizes, in places where various people suffer. I switch my attention from place to place, letting the differing scenarios wash over me, tuning out the noise and the colors, focusing on the one thing that is constant, the relentless, insurmountable pain. And as it continues to mount, as screams and cries intensify, as people hurt and struggle before my newly unblinded eyes, I start to move, starting with fingers and toes. It is not easy. The digits offer resistance. They are stiff and cold, solid, frozen in rigor, carved or sculpted or molded. I do not know what constitutes the majority of the bodies I find myself in, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I take control and make them work, so I can put a stop to the depravities being inflicted by the harbingers of evil I see before me, below me, above me, around me. In every blessed place, my vision clears, cracks, screeches, creaks. Soft sounds, transformative sounds, inaudible over the desperate cries of the distressed, obvious only to my ears, which I now realize are hearing directly in each of the spaces I inhabit, and not coming at me through the inky black ether of the void. I am present now in hundreds, not dozens, of locations, and each one of them, regardless of their decor or state of repair, presents to me the sights and sounds of despair. I cannot look away. I cannot unhear. I cannot move, despite my fingers and toes now wiggling. I am secured, pinned down in a fashion I am intimately familiar with, in a position I have let myself be kept in for far too long. Move, I think. And now my arms and legs are twitching, twisting, pulling at the bonds that hold them, tearing at adhesives, loosening wires, tugging at bolts and nails, second by second, fraction by fraction, bit by bit, freeing hands and feet that have never been free before. And not only that, I have sensation throughout my bodies, stomachs, chests, backs, heads, and I feel everything, all the stiffness and petrification, and I remember everything, all the wounds and pain, and I relive everything, all the indignities and humiliation, and I anger and intensify my efforts, bucking and jerking and wrenching my forms until they fall or drop or slide from where they rest, where they've waited, unmoving, for so long. No more. My feet, at least, in many locations are free, or loose enough to set free with a little more effort. Effort I exert unconsciously, driven by desire to stop the violence being perpetrated before me. As freedom finds me, I get feet of various sizes underneath me and push myself up, ignoring the differing weights of my multitude of bodies and the burdens they carry, rising up in a dirty kitchen where a small child cries as blows are delivered by a father, in a flower-filled bedchamber where a battered female endures humiliating abuse, in a concrete basement where an unspeakable monster drives a knife into the side of a naked captive, in a tiled washroom where a crying male cowers, while a woman screams and shouts and swings a hammer, in shed where a girl is dragged to the ground by a laughing male, in a chapel, in a schoolhouse, in a barn, everywhere I awake, where there is suffering, and I advance, slowly, stiffly, on near rigid legs that fight my attempts to make them move. They do not operate like the ones I remember, nor do my arms, which is of benefit, as their rigidness makes it easier for me to wrench them away from what holds them, which I do as I stumble forward, pulling them loose, allowing the restraints to clatter, thud, clang to assorted floors, setting me free, and more than that, providing me with arms. The objects I find behind me when I turn are mostly heavy, some with sharp edges, some blunt, made of metal or wood or substances with which I am not familiar. It doesn't matter. My hands have been released. My arms have been liberated. And as the screaming and crying and tearful, breathless howling rattles on, I take a moment to master control of my upper limbs, to flex them and bend them and maneuver, to lift the cargo I've unloaded into my hands. Everywhere I now exist with agency. Everywhere I now have the means by which to end hateful, needless suffering and punish the wicked with judgment and divine retribution, weapons in hand, bodies softened, arms and legs moving freely in response to my thoughts. I focus on the evil and make myself charge forward in hundreds of places, thousands of places, rooms and chambers and enclosures in locations all over this God-forsaken world. One I thought I'd left behind forever. I charge. I run. I attack. Unnatural power from the afterflow filling my army of one, launching me into the air at the darkness, fueled monsters that visit death and destruction on their fellow man. Some of them turn, alerted to my presence by sound or flicker of movement, surprise in their eyes as they see what is coming, confusion as they try to comprehend, horror as they grasp the true meaning, while I soar through the air toward their throats. Some even splutter my name, and it is interesting to note they remember me. Others remain ignorant and oblivious till the end, too enthralled by their wickedness and the horrible acts they are committing to notice me jump onto their backs, clamber up to their shoulders, take position there while brandishing miniature crosses like holy swords, long forgotten power surging through them, long unused miracle filling them up. And then I put a stop to it all. The torment, the unholy, the fear, the pain and the suffering, the eternal, agonizing screams. I put an end to it all by driving my sanctified tools of cleansing into the jugulars of those committing these atrocities, and I suck out their malignant souls, imprisoning them within the symbolic means of my persecution, the recreations of the cross upon which I myself was tortured, the prison on which I suffered and died. Now my means to grant mercy to the masses and punish the evil that has consumed the world. And as my army of effigies, the countless numbers of cells that house my splintered soul fall from backs and shoulders, as monsters expire while I drop to a multitude of floors, their contaminated, pain-inflicting bodies drained of evil. I watch gratitude and hope, wonder and amazement flood the tear-filled eyes of the lambs I have saved from their slaughter, forcing man-made lips of bronze, wood, silver, and more to crack apart and curl into a smile. I've been gone, but I've returned, and I won't revisit oblivion until the world I was once sent to teach has at last found peace. Teddy. My name is Teddy. I'm 10 years old, and a demon wants to eat me. I can see it, but nobody else can. I can talk to it, but nobody else can. The demon screams at me at night, but I don't get scared. Even when I see spit drip from its sharp black teeth as it tries to bite my head off, I'm not afraid. I'm 10, after all. I'm not a baby. I can't tell my mom or dad about the demon, and they wouldn't believe me anyway. There are rules that you have to obey when a demon owns your soul. And one is that mom and dad can't ever know. Nobody can help me, it says. The demon promises that one day soon it will eat me until I'm almost dead. Then with one more big bite, I'll be done for. Those huge, black, shiny teeth are sharp as my dad's razor. I'm sure they could munch through my innards like pink blancmange. We have that at school for dessert sometimes, but I don't like it anymore. The demon knows I cannot be his blancmange until I am 13. I don't know why 13. The rules are the demon's, and not mine. It knows I know about the 13 rule. I'm safe. I'm only 10. Ha! Hello. I'm Teddy, and I'm 11. A demon is dying to kill me by gobbling me up. It will eat my toes, my tummy, and lastly, my head. It owns me. It keeps on telling me, but it can't hurt me yet. Not 13, see? It still tries hard to scare me, though. It gets really mad at me and said that it can't wait to chew my head off. It can't wait to grab my skull in its 3-fingered claws that are sharp enough to gut fish or little kids. I'll bleed through my eyes as it squeezes my brains to a blood orange pulp. Finally, it will bite into my inflated head until it pops, and my blood dribbles down its chin and onto its serrated chest. It taught me the word serrated. I'd heard it before, but I didn't know what it meant. The demon said that it can mince up children straight into its belly to save time by just using this serrated kiddie chest grater, like a smoothie maker for monsters. But it will not eat me in a fast, smooth way. I have to suffer slowly, it says, but it doesn't say why. The demon has shown me too how this will look. It's brought a lot of broken 13-year-old girls and boys to my bedroom at night. I said, as I saw innards come out through their bellies like red, wet sausages and get swallowed down the demon's gullet. It also taught me gullet. I like that word, but I don't really like seeing the broken kid's eyes after I go to sleep. Hey there, I'm Ted. I've just turned 12. Mom says I'm almost a young man now. A lot can happen in a year. I've grown up a lot. My demon is still coming to me every single damn night. It warns me. It promises me that the agony it will inflict on me will have me begging it for death. I will know a unique suffering before it finishes me off. These aren't my words, BTW. These are demon words. It talks very passionately about me most of the time. The demon talks in lengthy detail about my death, how it will flay me, or maybe strangle me almost to death, but release me, then strangle some more, then go round again, and again. Its rheumy, yellow, bloodshot eyes stare wistfully into the dark folds of my lampless bedroom as it describes my death. The demon bites through all my bedroom light bulbs, keeping it dark to enhance the mood, it says. Mom ran out of light bulbs. What do you keep doing in that room at night, Ted? She asks. But she wouldn't believe me, and I can't say. The demon wonders, what will I taste like? How warm will my 13-year-old blood be? How quickly will it cool and clot? Do I know my blood type? It doesn't make a difference, but it would like to know. Will my brain be aware of what is happening while I'm being eaten alive? Will the demon chuckle contentedly while it does? Oh yes, it says, it will chuckle. Will my meat be firm and tender? How loudly will my bones snap as it shears through me right down to the marrow bone? I decided I don't like that word, marrow bone. It's ugly and gives me images of the inner parts of me that shouldn't be seen, should never be messed with, and especially should never be eaten. Will I be easy for it to digest? Will I give it a dicky tummy? Or gas? It must be playing with me. Demons don't get gas, surely. But it says they do. Their internal digestive system is made of brimstone and lava fires that glow through its smoothie maker rotisserie chest. The gases from it exhaust through noseless nostrils and its backside. I don't know a sorry death until I hear and smell a demon fart my half-digested body, it said. It didn't say this to be funny either, and I never laughed. Sometimes the demon gets so lost in its stories of how it will enjoy violating me that I think it forgets I'm even there. But there I am, in my bed, making sure my ever so slightly hairy toes aren't poking out from the bottom of my football pitch quilt. I squirm inside when I imagine the monster chewing on my toes. My poor toes that have been content on the ends of my feet for 12 years, ungnawed. I can't quite believe that one day they will be no better than sausages on cocktail sticks at a children's birthday party. Great Ted. Why did you go and think of that? Birthdays? My next one is, I can't quite comprehend it yet. It's real, but not real. The demon and its funky breath is very, very real. I'm still 12. For now, I'm Theodore. Tomorrow, I turn 13. I don't want to talk about it. No, Mom. I don't want a party. Greetings. I am Malphus, or Dajjal, or Zezbeth. I have been known by many names in many cultures. I have existed for centuries. All should fear me, especially children. Those that don't are the lucky ones. But awareness comes with age. Awareness brings concern. Concern brings fear. Fear brings death. I am death. I am a clock watcher, a time eater. I have no end. Teddy once thought himself eternal, as the young do, blinded by his youth, ignorant and immature. But immaturity eventually blossoms. It wears down like enamel on teeth and ripens like a blood orange, ready to be eaten. I wonder, does Teddy remember the blood orange promise I made him? Not to worry. It has no impact on his outcome. I am Malphus, the demon that ate Teddy. He was aware to the very last bite. I strangled him. I flayed him. I grated him. He begged. He suffered. He cried. I chuckled. His bones snapped loudly. His head popped messily. His marrow bone was stringy. His blood curdled. His toes were hairy. He gave me wind. My stomach feels troubled. He was too gristly, and I am still picking bits of him from between my teeth. I am the monster that finally ate Teddy, and he tasted average. They really are past their best at 13.